in favor of a dominant norm. America is basically built like that, because what America is about is erase whatever you were before. You're going to have to become American, and what American means is basically erasing where you came from before to be like us. And we're only 200 and some odd years old. So yeah, there's social mobility, but that means it comes at the price of you erasing what you were. And what if that was an older, more successful pattern? And here's where I have to say that, because here's my bias. I'm a drug counselor. So one of the things that I notice, and what the literature bears out, is that these immigrants, these quote-unquote illegal immigrants, are, from Mexico or whatever, before the border was created and they were welcome here, they have family values. They use drugs less than Americans. Their kids actually don't tell their parents to F off. They don't get into trouble until they come here, and they don't use drugs in particular, until they come here, and then there is a disconnect between the parents who have the old country values and the kids who are trying to become American, and their drug use starts going up. So if I'm in substance abuse prevention with kids of color, we need to not have you be like Americans. Because literally what has happened, and I can see this in my own life as well, when I went to school in South Central, there were no drugs. Or the drugs, the weed that they were selling was actually oregano. But when I moved to going to the rich white school, you could get anything you wanted in any quantity, and it was top shelf, because these are movie stars' kids. And they're using all this other kind of stuff. And so if you want to be popular, and the popular kids have money, and they're doing drugs, what are you going to have to do if you want to be in with the in crowd? Right. So that's one of the things that we look at within the drug prevention. I mean, this has real world consequences. So what we find then is if people are trying to assimilate, they erase those what we call cultural protective factors that are generated within their own cultural axiologies that protect them from certain negative health consequences, like addiction. Now the question then becomes, okay, then what do we do for white kids? That was a question. Well, we know what the white kids are doing. They're trying to become like us. That's what the hippies were. That's what 80% of what they used to call black style gangs in Oregon. I mean, this is a term that they're using now. 80% of the black style, what they used to call black style gangs, but with 80% of the kids in the gangs are white kids, can't call them black style anymore, so they call it LA style, like that's different. 80% of those recruits are white kids. Why are white kids who are middle class trying to get in with and emulate being like black gangsters? Literature had nothing to say about that. Right? So, part of assimilation then. Erasing your native culture. In favor of dominant. In fact, you often hear in diversity circles dominant culture, by which we mean Western, by which we mean Western equals white, that whole meme, right? So assimilation, erasing native culture in favor of dominant culture. So again, the question becomes in terms of what were the Irish before they were Catholic? What were the Irish, Germans, Scots, Russians before they became American? So assimilation. Acculturation, which is more positive within the literature, is basically taking on cultural artifacts, and technologies without erasing your native pattern. Acculturation. Now, in anthropology, we're talking about human cultures, sometimes divided by ethnicity. In this sense, we are now defining culture not just by ethnicity, but also by axiology, also by socioeconomic status, also by technology. In order to get in here, you had to be computer users. Used to be, in order to get into Lane Community College, all you used to have is a telephone because we used to do telephone registration. Oh, this is nothing. You used to have to, when you may have noticed I tend to be tech forward, especially for this school. They used to do, I remember when registering for college, when an entire year of college, an entire semester cost you $150 for a full-time load. Okay? Books were another $50 to $100. So $250 a term total. We registered using IBM computer cards for each class. You had to line up in the gym, different departments, and you'd get, okay, class is closed when they ran out of 35 computer cards because it was based on how many seats there were. We did that at Lane Community College. I wasn't here then. We did that until a black president, the only black president that Lane Community College has ever had, who came here from another school who did telephone registration. Because, no, this gym thing ain't working. This is not efficient. People should just be able to stay at home and phone in and just follow a phone tree, and you just need a computer system that's supporting doing that. Then they thought he was crazy. Well, no, I'm not crazy. This is what other bigger schools are doing. This is the wave of technology. Not everybody has a computer. Everybody has a telephone. Boom, let's do that. So we went from telephone registration to now what you experience. You got to have an email and you got to have a computer, and it's all online. Who knows what it'll be next? You probably just think. All right? So each one of those is a culture. Are you holding on to the old ways, or are you going to change? Right? There's a culture there. Right? So acculturation is taking on artifacts and Question?
No. Yeah.
What?
You play the guitar?
Yeah. Not just the guitar, but yeah. Come on, come back. So, an easy way of thinking of acculturation. How many of you eat Chinese food with chopsticks? And you still use a fork, right? Okay. Acculturation, taking on chopsticks. Which hand do you eat with?
Right.
Which do you write with?
Right.
I learned to use chopsticks from my dad. So he's sitting across the table and he's left-handed. So if I'm mirroring him, I have to go right-handed, but I eat left-handed. I can't use chopsticks left-handed. I eat Western left-handed, and I write right-handed. I don't know what that means, but I'm just saying. Acculturation is learning to use chopsticks and even eat right. He basically did that because he worked at the post office in San Francisco, and they had half an hour for lunch. So one of the things that he noticed is that the Chinese people were always coming back on time because the nearest restaurants to his particular substation were in Chinatown. So he, went to have lunch with them, and they ate rice with chopsticks. Duh, right? And they were fast. So he learned okay, I got to be that fast too. Now he's from, black from Southern black, right? So I learned to do chopsticks, and so that's why we go to this particular restaurant, because this is where you used to go when you worked in the post office before you went to medical school. Wow. Far East Cafe on Grant, in case you All right, so acculturation. Taking on cultural artifacts without erasing your native cultural pattern. Now, the reason Nichols' model didn't have this is that's really complicated by itself to do that. Because where his model gets criticized is, well, I'm not like this. I'm an Indian from India, and I'm not like this Asian model. Actually, I'm more American than, okay, well, that's an assimilation piece. Well, what if I was born here? Does the axiology still work? Yes, it does. And he gives specific examples of how that works. So, 4 axiologies. Euro-American, African, he used to call this African-Hispanic. So it's not just African-Hispanic, it's African, Latino, more Arab, South American, Asian Pacific Islander, and Native American. Now, obviously, not everybody on the planet is these groups, but he's speaking in an American context. Right? Because most of the corporations that are hiring them are American. So, axiology, the highest value. The object, highest value is the relationships, highest value is group cohesion, and I need to adjust that so that it actually fits. So that includes a view of time, the epistemology, the logic and process. Let's see if we can fit this all on one page. Coming up. Come on. Today. The rainbow wheel of death. Okay. All right, so let's see. I think the next one hopefully goes into All right, so 4 axiologies. We'll go back. All right, so those 4 axiologies. So I'll go over them one by one. So how an axiology develops in his theory is that any human culture concerns itself with survival and what you have to do concerning food, water, and shelter. And because, usually when I do this class, I'll start with the African, and I've made reference to African diunital logic already. That came from Nichols' construct. He usually starts, because he's usually speaking with a white audience, with Europe, because we're speaking English. So you need to know where the worldview came from of the language you're speaking, because it doesn't necessarily question that. We start with Europe because we're speaking English, using Latin characters, because England was conquered by the Romans. Now, if England had been conquered by the Arabs, He's speaking Arabic, which is an interesting question of like, why, okay, we're not using Roman numerals. Well, because the Romans, when they fell, basically who taught us numbers was Arabs. That's why you learn algebra, using Arabic constructs from the Dark Ages. So, Western civilization is, England was conquered by the Romans. Western civilization is an attempt to recreate the Roman Empire using a westernized form of Christianity as a vehicle for conquest. The original meme for Christianity wasn't about conquest. So we're basically looking at the Romanized view of Christianity. So one of the things he's talking about with this particular axiology is what he's describing is male dominant, and this is basically critical when you're describing a culture. What is the dominant axiology? So for Euro-Americans, he's talking about male dominant Western Romanized Christianity as the basic model. And he's saying before Roman conquest, it was matrilineal. It was female or egalitarian. But that history got erased. Okay? You can't have a Boudica, a queen, leading combat troops into battle against the Romans unless your culture allows men taking orders from a woman. She can't just be sitting on the throne. She actually has to be combat ready. She has to be a badass warrior in her own right. Okay? But the history making that okay or normal was erased as part of the narrative to create Western civilization. Okay? So everything that follows, this is what he's describing. He said, yes, there are other axiologies operating in European culture, because you will get people who will say, that's not my culture. I mean, white people saying, this is not my culture. This is not how I was raised. And you'll get some basically people who are like direct line Wiccan or pagans who are, from the old country who maintain their Irish culture. Say, yeah, we resisted the Romans and we maintained that in secret. And that's how I was raised. So this whole dominant thing, that ain't us. But I can see where you might think it is. And because I look white, but I'm not white. But you're Irish. Got an Irish, okay, right. So they're saying, okay, this Euro-axiology model is male, dominant, Christian. There are other axiologies within European culture, and obviously then there are probably other axiologies in operation in the other axiologies as well, the other ethnic axiologies as well, right? So with that caveat, so if we look at the conditions thousands of years ago in Central Europe, let's say the Black Forest, the example that Nichols uses, because he was educated in that area, let's take the Black Forest in Germany. We see that people living in those areas had a short growing season and a severe winter. Snow could be on the ground from September to May, leaving 3 months to plant, grow, harvest, and store food through the long winter. 3 months. Okay, so let's say June 1. You got to plant. So June 1. You got to get up right on the job planting your food whether you feel like it or not. You must be on time and get it done quickly because you only have 3 months. Well, what if you don't feel like it? Smoked a little weed or something. Oh, right. This is not, what's the state? Oh, Washington and Colorado. This is Germany. So what if you don't feel like it? Too bad. What if you're sick? This is also 10,000 years ago before Christianity, right? And after the Ice Age. So you have 2 wives. Right? Because female fetuses tend to be more viable, so women outnumber men. That's still true today. So you have a social form that's not the nuclear biological family. It's probably extended. So you have 2 wives. You only have 3 months to plant, grow, harvest, and store your food. All right? Got to do it, whether you feel like it or not. So this creates a work ethic. Be on time. Okay? Since you can't eat corn or grain that you haven't stored yet, the highest value becomes what you've got, the object. And the epistemology becomes counting and measuring. How do you know how much you've got, and do you have enough to get through the winter? Because you only have 3 months. Okay, so one of the things that, when you look at what happens in October, what happens in September with your plants? Harvest. So then what do you do in October? What happens in Germany in October? Oktoberfest, right? And what is Oktoberfest? It's a harvest celebration. So one of the things that happens within this axiology is the preservation of food technologies. Cheese. Okay? Beer is a way of basically, what I may not have told you, this is not the drug class, but alcohol technology comes about from an agricultural surplus as a means of storing the grain, because alcohol preserves it, right? So remember that rule in Ireland about nobody makes whiskey until everybody has bread first? Who would make a rule like that except for the women that control the drug technology, because they are the wise women that have the herbs and the growing and all that kind of stuff, and the centers of the religion. So you only have 3 months. So you are in the middle of winter, and these 2 wandering rogues show up at your door, and they're hungry. They've been out partying. And so you've only stored up enough food for your family and nobody else. How do you deal with these folks? They want some food. What are you going to say to them within this axiology? Tough luck, right? What if they want to take it by force? What will you do? What? Kill them, right? So the highest value then becomes the object. The object is even more important than life. You will kill to protect your property. Yes? Is that a cultural value within this axiology that's accepted? Okay, so Nichols, being an industrial psychologist, how do you test this hypothesis? Look at the death rate. Look at the death rate. Okay, so as an example, what is unemployment at now? No? It's 7.8. I think it just went up to 7.9. It dropped from 8. Right? That because sign of the economy improving. Okay? Not necessarily your field, but it is mine. Right? Psychology. Nichols said, and he pointed out, and the statistics bear him out, 0.1% increase in the unemployment rate, meaning more people are out of work, equals, stay with me, equals 700 suicides of white men. Because they lost their job, or because they lost their family farm. Okay? The meme is, if I can't provide for my family, if I can't be the breadwinner, I am of no use. Okay? If I don't have the ability to provide the objects, I am of no use. We even have this meme within Western psychology, within Western civilization, particularly America, that your value is your net worth. You count by how much money you got, how much property you have. He who dies with the most toys wins. That's the highest value, is the control or acquisition of the object. Therefore, if I don't have the ability to acquire or maintain the objects, my value is nothing, and I will kill myself. Okay? Just a 1/10 of a percentage increase equals 700 suicides. Well, that's fact. How many black men kill themselves because they ain't got no job? Don't happen. Different axiology. All right? So that's how you check, if the construct is valid, for example. So, the death stat. So, if you don't seize the moment now, it will pass, never to return. So one becomes very task and time-oriented. And actually, within this axiology, we even have a saying, time is money. Right, because you get paid by the... Right? So, important technology becomes the preservation of food to store away. One also tends to value stocks of food and hoarded possessions, so much so that you'll defend them to the death because it means your death if you run out of food or other scarce resources. That's why you have hoarders. That's why you have preppers. Boom. So, one possible response to scarce resources in a hostile environment is the European axiology. Highest value is the object or acquisition of the object. Okay, so within this axiology, then, nearly anything can be objectified. That's why you have that language within feminism. Women as objects, women as property. If I can't have you, no one can. Right, a woman is not property. Any man who thinks so is like in a dream world. But that is the value of chattel slavery. Property. People are property. Okay? So, male-dominant, Romanized Christianity. There are other axiologies exist within European axiology. This is a dominant one in operation here in America. So, the relationship of the person to the object. Objects in caps because the object is more important. Highest value lies in the object or the acquisition of the object. Objects can have a higher importance than life itself. He who dies with the most ties win. You ain't a man without possessions or a job. No job, no worth. So that farm suicide stat, basically where that came from. Anything can be objectified. Land, power, woman, nature, time, money. So people can become objectified and thus be seen to have relative value. If you have more things, you're more valuable. So, for example, kings, nobles, own serfs and slaves, i.e., as we would say today in the 21st century, human resources. Think about that. Where did that come from? I told you the origin of the F word, right? Do you remember that? Okay. King has the right to sleep with your wife on your wedding night because you're both his property. You could execute somebody for killing a deer on the king's land, even if you're starving. Everything on that land is the king's property. Okay? Living things then in this construct become natural resources and can even be considered valuable, replaceable, consumable, or expendable like any other object. So when you think about what's, how many of you are property owners? Or aspiring to be property owners? It don't matter, all right? Yes, you are? Okay. So here's one of the issues that comes up with Indian law in particular, but also land. It's not just the surface of the land, it's what's under it. i.e. minerals, i.e. oil, i.e. natural gas, and the mineral rights. You own a piece of property, you have mineral rights to it in this concept.